Now, the one thing we got to point about all these DC and Marvel superheroes is that as time goes on, new creators come and they always want to put their own voice into the character, put their own stamp on the character. So with Wonder Woman, her creators, William Moulton Marsden and H.G. Peter, worked on the character for a long period of time. Unfortunately, Marsden passed away, and then a few years later, Peter passed away. And so the strip was taken over by a writer named Robert Kanigher, who is one of the most prominent DC writers of this era. Some people like him, some people don't like him. I can certainly say he's a creative writer. He's, again, full of ideas. You might not like all of his ideas, but he certainly wanted to put his stamp on Wonder Woman. And so in 1959, himself and the new artist Ross Andru, they took over Wonder Woman. And the first thing they did was they rebooted her origin. They certainly maintained most of the elements of the original. Okay, one thing I got to point out is in the original version in All-Star number 8, one of the things that happens is Wonder Woman has to participate in a tournament in order to see who will be the person to join Steve Trevor back in Man's World. In the original version, they're all wearing these little domino masks. And so even though Queen Hippolyte forbids Diana from participating in the tournament, she's able to because she's wearing this little domino mask. And just like Superman, Clark Kent with his spectacles, no one's able to recognize that he's Superman. So Diana's mother couldn't see that this was her own daughter in this competition. In this version, things get a little bit different, but let's just talk about Wonder Woman number 98 and Wonder Woman number 105, because this is where her origin is expanded. Again, completely different writing style, completely different art style now. I don't know what to say. I'm a huge fan of the Silver Age. I love Otto Binder and Ed Hamilton's Superman comics from this era. I certainly enjoyed this comic, but it did feel a lot more tame. It felt like more like a kid's comic at this point. I did like the art, but again, primitive, not as good as Ross Andru's later stuff on Spider-Man. We can get into specifics in a minute, but G.I. Julie, what was your impression of this rebooted origin?
Yeah, it was good. It reminded me of the early Superman stories that I've read where he just like does stuff that you like, you know, he's not foiling bad guys' plots. Like there's no rogues gallery of characters that there's no familiar and like villains. There's no villains. She's just doing stuff like that you would see her do, like, you know, play a harp, compete in a tournament, turn a penny into $1 million. But it's kind of, this one was a little bit strange though. Strange in a good way. It made the story interesting because like most of these origin stories that we're going to cover, there's always a competition to see who's the best Amazon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's always Diana. And in this one, so that it's a fair challenge, everyone wears a mask that looks like Diana's face.
That's why I brought that up. That's ridiculous, but go ahead.
Yeah, like it's like Mission Impossible. Not Mission Impossible. Yeah, it's like
Mission Impossible. Right.
And it, like at the end of every round, after each Amazon is, you know, no doubt knocked out of the competition, she takes her mask off, her Diana mask off, and that is what is creepy and weird.
And she's Diana, underneath,
because it's like, and it's like the queen. It's Hippolyta, or is it Hippolyta or Hippolyte?
Hippolyte sounds more Greek to me, so you're right. It's probably Hippolyte, right? Oh, and by the way, the spelling does change. So technically, sometimes it's Hippolyte, sometimes it's Hippolyta or Hippolyta.
So the queen of the Amazons, there you go. The queen of the Amazons is always just like, you know, in her own mind, she's like, oh, good. Diana didn't remove her non-mask, so she's still in it to win it. And like, it's just crazy. I actually really love the art in this book. It's the closest to George Perez, the way that George Perez draws her, except for the hair at some points. But it's the closest to my favorite artist, who draws pretty much everybody, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. So she just has like that Mattel Barbie doll face in this, and like just like the first All-Star number 8, she's rendered as an Amazon. The women, it's like no holds bar. They aren't as bondagely clad as that book, but they wear clothes that are sort of like befitting of athletics, and they're powerful women, so they have muscles, they have definition, they have, some of them have big hips, some of them have big asses, some of them have big butts, like big muscular thighs. They're muscular Amazonian women, and it's like kind of nice to see in a book. And so far, Steve Trevor is the only concurrent link. He's introduced here too as somebody who falls to the island, and it's not even a competition. They're at the end of it. She grabs him, and in order to make sure he doesn't see their island, she uses the power of her breath to use his parachute to like parachute them away and to return him to the world of man. Right. Super cool. And that's it. She's just like, he's calling her names. He's like pretty much calling her everything but baby. And she's like, okay, cool. Bye. Like, I got stuff to do. I still have to turn this penny to $1 million. So you're back where you should be. And she keeps running into him, and he keeps calling her Angel. I like how, it's not like a feminist thing. It's just he doesn't, she's not super interested in him because she's got Wonder Woman things to do.
Right. Well, and the thing is I guess you could say, there's a lot of, I guess we'll call them Marvel zombies back in the 60s and today that look down on these classic DC comics because of exactly this type of story. But I got to say, there's still something to be said for the fact that this is a done-in-one story. She has a very simple goal. She has to turn this, because, by the way, in this story, it's sort of two things. It's her origin, but it's also this story about the $1 million penny. Her mother tells her, you have to turn this penny into $1 million. It's a very simple goal. And guess what? At the end of the story, she accomplishes her goal. So at the very least, you can say that this is a complete done-in-one story. And it's creative. It's funny, right? You can go back. You can pick it up anytime. You can read it. You don't need to read any other comics, which is not something you can say for comics of today, and even Marvel comics of the 1960s. They tended to continue and go on and on and on, which is fine, but it made it harder to pick up just one issue and read it, right? Which this is something you can definitely pick up.
Oh yeah. Like the story is, the plot is about this penny, but also a little bit about like, so it's sort of about how, it's not really about her origin and more like that competition. It's always, the competition part of her origin is always present, I find, in these books, except for one we're going to review later or talk about later. But like, the story is driven by the penny. She's chasing this penny through man's world. And it's like, a boy picks it up and he puts it in a machine. The machine spits it back out. Like, it's crazy. It's like, dude, where's my car? Or like, Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. The entire plot is driven by one thing.
MacGuffin, right? A MacGuffin.
Exactly, but it's a fun, like, it's a fun ride.
I agree.
And it doesn't get boring. It gets interrupted by like the silliness, because in the original issue it had like other stories. It was sectioned off into parts, which I didn't really like. But
again, this is not a masterpiece, but I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't just, like you said earlier, this wasn't just people fighting. There was a story to it, right? Like in this issue 105, Wonder Woman is doing all these fantastic feats, like fighting a whale and, building a boat in like a split second. And again, more like a fairy tale, more like a myth, right? This is not just a wrestling match between Wonder Woman and the cheetah. This is the story, and that's why I liked it.
Yeah, it's great. I loved it. So far, Diana has been made out of clay, and they haven't changed that.
Right.
Like, they're just going with that flow.